أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله ما بعد. I pray all of you are well, inshallah. So we are back here for our monthly seminar, and alhamdulillah, so far we have managed to read the first part, which is half the book, alhamdulillah, and we've finished reading it. We have had a student-run seminar for that already, alhamdulillah. So most of you have a very good idea of where we stand in terms of our reading in the book. So just to remind the audience, we are reading The Well-Educated Mind by Susan Wise-Boer, and it's a book which is written to educate the general masses on the value of reading, and then of course give them a guide on how to read. And then when the word read is mentioned, it is being very specific. We are talking about reading those few books that have very successfully changed the course of human race, right? That has sort of built the human civilization for good or for bad. And these books, this literature exists in all traditions. Some of those books are not within our tradition. Some of them belong to the Eastern tradition. Some of them belong to the Western tradition, and then some from within the the Middle Eastern, the Islamic, let's say the tradition that we belong to, the area or the region that we belong to. But then there's other pre-Islamic literature that again was absorbed into the later political realities, like the Persian literature, like the Hebrew literature of that time, the Talmud and all that. So these are all examples of great literature. So we are trying to, inshallah, through this book as the first step, trying to learn how to tackle books which matter, and there are few in number, as we've said, effectively, so that we can, inshallah, elevate our minds and inshallah elevate the minds of others around us, and inshallah make our dawah effective and make Islam applicable and more relevant to our communities, inshallah. So just to start off, just to summarize, we have been talking about classical education a lot, and we've defined classical education in the previous seminars, but just to sort of quickly summarize again, just so that we get the ground set for our discussion today, inshallah. We've mentioned that classical education is all about, so it's all about the trivium and using the trivium to read the great literature, right? And what we mean by that is, as a first stage, there is a mastery of language, right? You sort of learn the language to a very good degree, where then by way of that, you can tackle the great books, right? When you read literature which is difficult, your English or your Arabic or your Urdu or your Persian, whatever the language you're using to tackle that great book, and whatever the language that great book is in, you're not deficient in your tools, the basic tools of understanding, right? You shouldn't be, tackling vocab problems, vocabulary issues, right? That shouldn't be an issue. So that's the first thing. You have a general mastery of language, and of course, there's specific mastery of language which comes by reading specific literature in that language in a specific field. For just like a maths professor will be just as uh, you know let's say ill-educated in terms of speaking about botany, for example, or let's say psychotherapy, as a layman, because both of those things, they require specific language training. In either case, and in any case, so that's the first. So we've said mastery of language is the first stage. Then using that mastery of language, through using that language as the vehicle, as the primary vehicle of civilizational knowledge, right? We then jump into the books, right? And inshallah, we are going to lay out our own reading list, inshallah. But this lady, this author, has given her side of things, the Western tradition of the great books, and that's what she's using as a foundation to guide us on this reading journey. But as we've said many times, Islamic tradition has its own great books. The Arabic tradition has its own great books, and so on and so forth. And in our, inshallah, in our curriculum, the readings that we are going to be tackling, inshallah, over time, there is going to be an element of the Western tradition when we tackle history and philosophy. Over time, there will be, inshallah, if there's a need for that at a certain point, we can tackle Urdu literature. But primarily, our main goal is to, inshallah, tackle the great books of the Arabic and Islamic tradition, inshallah. And of course, as a parallel study, we can, inshallah, carry on with some readings in the Western tradition as well, or at least using English as the language of instruction in that. So that's the first thing, mastery of languages, and then make that a primary vehicle, towards the civilizational knowledge which is encoded in the books, to truly come to terms with the realities of the world that we live in. So we come to face to face with the greatest ideas, or let's say the ideas that have had the greatest impact on our society, at least, even if they're not the greatest ideas, such as Marxism and others. These ideas are false and batil in our Islamic paradigm. However, they've had a huge significance on the world history. So, all of these great ideas, we come to terms with them, we learn them, we understand them, and then that understanding, right, is what we want to achieve through this reading, right? Because reading, what is this act of reading? Reading is a synonym of learning, right? At least one of those mediums of learning. There's learning through observation. There's learning through, let's say, divine inspiration and so on and so forth. But primarily speaking, reading or instruction, let's say instruction, right? Reading is a form of instruction, then is lectures and so on and so forth. So specifically a written record, and that is the living, tradition. More often than not, the things and the ideas that have changed the course of history, they have been encoded in the form of books thus far, right? I mean, perhaps in the future we'll have more of the great ideas encoded in the form of a video, podcast, perhaps, or interviews and so on and so forth, which are very much increasingly are being documented on video media and so on and so forth. So reading, as we've said, is learning. These are all things that we've already established. Reading is learning, and then we learn to not regurgitate, to sort of download facts into our minds and then regurgitate them like parrots. The idea of learning to, sort of to download all of this information into our own minds is to understand things deeply. And right, as we've said, come face to face with the realities, come to terms with the realities of the world that we live in, so that we can completely and holistically implement our religion, in this world, and guide our communities accordingly. Right, so we learn to see things for what they are, to be enlightened. This word enlightened basically means to sort of burn that flame inside your being that emanates that inner light that sort of helps you perceive what you may not perceive, or what you may have not perceived otherwise, right? So to really understand how the world operates, for example, such a political principle, such as the fact that Henry Kissinger, in his book Diplomacy, for example, he mentions how every nation, its place in the world, right, it is only trying to safeguard its own best interests. It's not there to safeguard others, which is completely in opposition to the Islamic paradigm, which is that our nation is there, it exists to uplift justice from the world, right? So the opposite. Anyway, the point being that these are realities. These are principles that the world governments operate on. They want to, instill their existence in the hearts and minds of those whom they subordinate, right? That's why you have military bases all over the world. That is why you have embassies, right? That is why you have cultural programs that exist. So these are realities, right? So you won't be able to truly internalize them, and you won't be able to make sense of what's happening around you unless and until you know the ideas behind them and the history behind things, and so on and so forth. Right? So we read to learn, and then to learn, we learn to be enlightened, and then the whole purpose behind enlightenment to become educated in the true sense of it is to fulfill the obligation that Allah Azza wa Jalla has put on our shoulders as Muslims, right? To repel the superstition and insanity that kufr and shirk, that is in the form of kufr and shirk and bid'ah, and preposterous and superstitious beliefs, and whatever the case may be. Our job is to repel those things, be the torchbearers for the human race, right? And subhanallah, through the coming of the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal, the last testament, the Quran, this not only made the human beings the torchbearers for its own race, but rather the torchbearers and the leaders and khulafa for the entire alameen, right? And that includes the jinn, which are another sentient beings, alongside us humans in existence, right? So to fully repel these atrocities, and to be able to express the criterion, the Furqan, in the most rhetorically sound and let's say the most in the most rhetorical and the most applicable expression that is most effective and efficient in repelling the evil that we're trying to repel with our beings, with our speech, with our hands, whatever the case may be, right? So expression. So that's language, then understanding and evaluation, and then by way of that, enlightenment, and then enlightenment leads to action, and action is, of course, al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar. طيب. So that is essentially the crux of the entire book, and that's why she's writing the book, and that's where we've come, where we come to so far in the book, and we've understood that she wants us to achieve some of those, some of the things that we're adding from our perspective as Muslims, but she's mentioned that you want to read, you want to enlighten yourself, you want to be educated, right? So she's going to give us a pathway according to her paradigm, at least through the Western canon. That is, you read through a method of self-study that existed in their tradition, and as well as existed in our tradition, which is the Islamic tradition, but slightly differently, and I'll comment on that in inshallah later. Right, so she wants to take us on that journey. So she says that's the first thing. Classical education is the way forward, and you should learn in this way, the trivium method, and then how you do that and the value of it. Then she moves on to giving you, once she's sold you that idea, then she moves on to chapter number 2, which is where she essentially makes you assess your own abilities. Are you ready to read? And if you are, then good. Then jump on to the next chapter, which is the tools that you're going to need while you read. And that is the idea of journaling, right? And so journaling essentially is very important for many reasons which are not mentioned in the book. And just to mention it right off the bat here, there's no one right method of journaling. Okay, there's never been the right method of journaling, and there's never been the right medium of journaling. And these things have fluctuated throughout the history, and they have changed as per the technologies available to the scholars and academics and readers of each era. So, for example, Leonardo da Vinci, the Italian Renaissance period. We have some of his journals that have been passed down to us, and they've been preserved in museums. When you have a look through it, it is not just a reading journal. It's this loose leaf, sort of leather-bound journal, right? In it, you find all sorts of things. In it, you find to-do lists. In it, you find, learning ambitions, drawings, ideas, planning for projects. So all sorts of things, any rough idea, any rough thought, you find it in there. So it's just the journal was a place to just simply and in the most efficient and let's say the frictionless manner to sort of channel your thoughts onto paper, so that you could let's say and catalog those things, right? And sometimes, of course, you have a thought and then you don't write it down, and a few moments later you've forgotten it, and that thought was of very high value. Unlike certain professions and certain authors who don't prefer to write down anything. They believe, like Stephen King, one of the famous authors, he believes that if a thought is really important and worth his time and worth mentioning and writing and putting forth to the world, it's just going to come to him again. And it is true for certain things and for certain people, but it's definitely not true for the majority of us. And it's important that we have this journal. Now, the journal, as I said, there's no one way of doing it. The best thing is to adopt an organized approach to journaling. Okay. And this is just a brief comment on journaling because this is not the main crux of it. We want to move on to chapter 4, which is the real topic of discussion in today's seminar, inshallah. Right. Before I comment on this, have you guys been using any journaling? How have you been journaling so far? Let's sort of catalog the indifference that we have amongst ourselves. So each of you, inshallah, let me know how you are journaling yourselves. How are you taking notes while you're reading? Are you using separate notebooks for these reading, or are you just bashing everything into a computer note, for example, Apple Notes, or whatever the case may be, or you're just let's say doing I don't know, some people are doing voice sort of notes kind of thing to record their thoughts. But what are you doing? What are your practices? Let me know, inshallah, in the comments. So journaling, as I said, has many forms. And the best approach, of course, as I said, there's no one method. There's no one best method. However, there are some best practices with journaling. The more organized you are and the more reviews you do of your journals, the better effect and the better hierarchy right is achieved. Let's say for example, I'll show you an example, in fact, of two journals that I've kept over time. This is this one as well. This is the two journals. I'll show you three journals I've kept over time. So this is my first ever journal. It's a pound notebook from a pound store, and this is my first ever journal. And I had no idea what journaling was back in the day, and I had no idea. It was a thing. It was a practice. It's just something that came intuitively, and I think that it comes to most students. But this was something different because it's not a journal or a notebook that normally people have. I got this to document my reading when I was preparing for my Oxford examinations, right? So this book essentially served as a collection of everything that I was reading for my degree. So this is, excerpts from newspapers. I literally hand copied a lot of things. And then, okay, this is something I was reading through a book on philosophy. So I have quotations from the book and then summaries in the same space. And then I have my critique of those arguments, right? And then later I have copied literally by hand tons of pages, verbatim from newspapers that I found interesting. And then I would at the end jot down some questions that were, sort of peeking to interesting to me. And I thought that they might be interesting if they came up in a tutorial, for example, or an interview with a professor, right? And then I had my problems and the things I disagreed with. And then I would also sometimes get tired of, copying. So I would just get it printed and just staple it in, And so then this sort of turned into, after I got through that phase, this became the kind of journal for my thoughts. And then I would scribble down some of my maths workings, right? Some solutions to some equations here. And then you would find some arguments for and against vigilantism, right? Is vigilantism good or bad, right? For arguments, against arguments. It promotes racism, justice leads to anarchy, promotes corrupt states, decreases human rights, undermines democracy, da 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 da. I was only 17 at that point. But in any case, this leads on to poetry. So I began putting down some poetry in it. And then it led to, planning and to-do lists and, summer plans and everything. And then the languages, sort of fluctuated. English to Urdu to Arabic. In fact, I mean, very little Arabic because I didn't really know much Arabic at that point, but mostly, and then lecture notes and so every kind of thing you can imagine. It's very scribbly and it's very untidy and it's all over the place. Right. That's the first thing. And very, very impressively, that's exactly how Leonardo da Vinci's journal was, right? All over the place, like his mind. Very, full of ideas. And of course, the thing is, as I said, inshallah, I'll come to best practices in a second, but I'm just showing you some examples here. So this journal is leather bound. So I wanted to up my game with journals because I really enjoyed my first experience. So, and then me being a sucker for space, I would draw lines. So because I used to write, I didn't like wasting space. So I would draw lines in the middle and scribble my notes in a smaller handwriting to save space and to squeeze in as much as I could in one place. So this is a different type of journaling. And something interesting about this is that this is the first thing, like, so I actually started the book of, I titled this journal, The Book of Knowledge, right? This is when I first started seeking knowledge with the Bismillah at the beginning. And I copied by hand the introduction of the etiquette of seeking knowledge, the famous book by Sheikh Bakr Abu Zaid, and its contents, its structure. So I was intuitively doing the same grammar stage thing, like all on my own. At that stage, I had no idea of what these things mean. However, it very, very, very quickly turned into my experiences in Pakistan because I'd recently traveled. Right, I'd come to Pakistan to seek knowledge, right? And this is a very scribbly kind of journaling of it's like a travelogue. I was writing a travelogue of all my experiences, the things I was going through. And you can see you will not be able to make much sense of it. It's too small, right? It's too small. There's a famous saying in Urdu. It says, if Musa writes, only God can read. Astaghfirullah. It shouldn't be said, but it's a funny statement. SubhanAllah. People say it. It's an Urdu metaphor, basically. If Musa writes, only God can read it. Astaghfirullah. Anyway, this very quickly became my way of, just so the difference between the first one and this one is this became my way of documenting my majalis and my sittings with the ulama. So I would not note down everything that they said, for example, and any advice they gave me. And you can see most of this then turn into an Arabic or Urdu kind of thing, because that's the mode of communication I was having in that phase of my life, right? And I traveled to a place to seek knowledge, and one of the teachers over there, he was into calligraphy, and so he wrote my name with his pens as a gift for me, as a souvenir of my travels, right? So he wrote my name, in his pen with his in his calligraphy skills. He wrote his name as well for me to remember. This is Muhammad Fahad, Hafizahullah. And that's another one he did for me as a souvenir. So yeah, this diary became, a lot of things. And then, subhanAllah, a lot of the ulama I met, they started, whenever they would give me a tazkiyah, for example, they would, just write it down in this diary. They would give me a tazkiyah and a piece of advice, for example. They would just mention it to me like this, in this journal. So I would have the autographs and their life advice and, many, many things of that nature, right? And so this was more of a documentation of my journey than rather than tackling of difficult literature. Tazkiyah is when you meet scholars and they come to know you and they trust you with your knowledge. They write words of dua, and they write words of affirmation of this person. We approve of him, basically. We approve of this person. So it's like a reference, basically. but Islamic reference by a scholar, right? And then I was also carrying these little papers and sheets in these journals because sometimes I didn't like wasting paper, so I would whatever paper I could find, I could just write it up. Then I made this journal, smaller, A5, I think this is A5, I believe, or B something. I'm not sure exactly what size this is, but this is especially for tackling reading and cataloging reflections. It doesn't have any lines. It doesn't have any lines. I actually prefer that when I'm scribbling. And this is one of my notes for a book I was reading, Deep Work by Cal Newport, some years ago. And this is how I sort of scribbled my notes. So essentially, titled chapter one, also its main sections on top, then its subsections, its main sub-argument, and its sub-arguments, and then summarizing the entire chapter in 1 or 2 lines, basically, just for my own recall. And that's the entire book, roughly, in 2.5 pages, right? So that's another form of journaling. And then this one is the largest one so far. This is quite old. This is 8-9 years old. I got this in the UK. I brought this with me. I didn't use it until recently. Almost I started using it about 3 years ago, but I did it on and off. This journal is mostly for planning my lectures. So, for example, even today's lecture, the seminar, the main points that I'm going to discuss, they're sort of mentioned in this flow chart, sort of kind of thing. So I've done point 1, arrow, and then I'm not sure if you can see it, but arrows, points, and then so on and so forth. So this is the structure that we are following, right? Then the back of it, again, my notes from my lectures. And there is a tazkiyah in here, if I can show you a picture. So again, a book named Taysir al-Mantiq. So we're studying logic with a sheikh. His name is Sheikh Abu Saif, Hafidhahullah. And so I would write the name of the book and the author, the sheikh I was studying with, and then we'll just get into the discussion of it. So and then I started using it to turn all of my books into questions. So a question catalog of my readings. So this is what a book I sort of summarized, or sort of structured in form of questions, the entire book in 1 page, right? And so on and so forth. I also use it for curriculum planning, for example, for the Jamia here. So a lot of things can go into it, right? A lot of things can go into it. This is a handwritten tazkiyah of a sheikh here in Pakistan, right? It's handwritten. That's his signature, and that's his writing for his dua and pieces of advice for me. Right, so this gives you an idea of how journaling happens, and all of these examples I've shown you. The point of all of this is to show you that this is how journaling has been done throughout the ages. All of these things that I've sort of tried and sort of implemented in my own way. These are essentially ways of journaling that people have implemented, right? People use journaling to record their thoughts, their thinking, their ideas, their to-do lists, their introspections, their readings, their quotations. If they're reading poetry, if they like any particular verse, they write it down. If they like any quotation, they mention that quotation in the book, and so on and so forth. Now, coming back to the point, which is best practices, and I just want to wrap it up quickly, because we want to move on to chapter 4 now, inshallah. Best practices for journaling are that you have at least 2 journals, okay? You need to have a journal which is going to serve the purpose of your phone, essentially. So I recommend this small pocket one. It's leather bound. You don't have to use leather bound. I like I got these in bulk, so they cost me quite cheap. They didn't cost me a lot. Perhaps £2 each, so quite cheap, inshallah. But this is my daily driver. this always stays with me. Any thoughts, any to-do lists, any rough planning, anything that I want to sort of do on the spot as I'm on the move. Yeah, any ideas, any things that I hear on the go, for example. Even if I hear, read something, when I'm outside, for example, and I don't have my main, journal which I record my facts in, for example, or my laptop, I'll just do it inside here. So have a daily driver. So at least you have at least something that where all your thoughts can go into. Okay, all your thoughts need to go somewhere so they don't get wasted. And then, of course, you need to be organized and efficient and a productive human being. So for that, you need to plan, right? To-do lists are important. You need to plan the next day before you go to sleep, right? The day before. So these are some best practices, inshallah, that we're going to cover later, in one of our courses, inshallah. The sharpening the axe course, more precisely. But this coincides with note taking and so on and so forth. So a daily driver where you at least have something to just channel your thoughts into, right? The second journal I recommend is your reading journal. So I could have just used this for what I did, for my lecture planning. That's right, it's easy. But for your readings, you should at least try and have a separate journal, right? And then what you can do is to organize your reading, you can have different journals based on different genres. So if you're reading history, you should have a separate journal for history. If you're reading separate for separate for hadith, separate for philosophy, political science, whatever we are reading, whatever the subject is you're reading, you just have a separate journal for it, and you have that kind of space in your house. Or what you can do is you can have a daily driver and just have a second driver for reading, okay? And then have a weekly review where you go through your reading and you organize your reading in let me show you if I can get it here. Just one moment. I'll share my screen quickly with you all, inshallah. Just one moment. Right. So I hope everyone can see the screen, inshallah. Okay, so you can see how the things that I'm reading, perhaps, you can find that I have separate folders, and towards the end of the week, all the ideas that I have somehow jotted in this one, or perhaps in some other place, I'll just bring them back into this in this organization. So I'll just type them up once a week. Okay, so these are some of the books I'm planning on writing. I'm working on them, and so just as an example, inshallah, this is a book on redefining education, essentially. So our education problem, what constitutes a faithful. So all of these ideas, these point us towards ideas, right? So all of these have at different points in time made their way into these journals. Okay, and over time I've sort of organized these things into here, right? And then when I'm reading these things, for example, when I'm reading on these specific topics, right, I find myself jotting down resources on things like this. Okay, so I just jot down all the resources that I'm reading. So this sort of works in this manner. Okay, inshallah. So coming back here, طيب. So inshallah, I think you have a good idea with this. This is generally a good practice. Okay, I don't recommend starting directly on a digital medium. Avoid digital medium as much as possible. Reading is supposed to take you away from screens, not in towards the screens, because reading is supposed to be introspective. It's supposed to be discovering yourself. It's supposed to be discovering a portion. The books are you're supposed to see an image of yourself in the book that you're reading, right? And you can't do that if you're staring into the screen, because screens, they have a way of disrupting your the neurotic activity, and it hurts the eyes, it stains the eyes. So it's, eyes getting strained, and then hurting your eyes, and then being in that posture where it's not very ergonomic. These are all things, right? But the point is that inshallah, that you do it physically, away from screens, inshallah. Okay, away from screens, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So only one person commented. I think it's only one person who commented, saying how they journal. I want to hear from others how you guys are, progressing with your journaling as well, inshallah. Okay. So, in fact, let's just get it out. Just give me your journaling practices quickly, inshallah. So I may move on to chapter 4. Just get it out of the way, inshallah. Okay. Just keep in mind, inshallah, make sure you have a daily driver. Get rid of your smartphones. Just buy one of those small, I'm not sure where it is. Yep, don't even have it here. See how careless I am with my phone. Phones are supposed to be away from you at all costs, generally speaking. Smartphones specifically. If you have a dumb phone, that's fine. In any case, you need to have a daily driver for your journaling, for your general thoughts and ideas. And when you read, inshallah, have a slightly bigger, but not, or, this size would do. And even this size is quite nice, I like the aesthetics of it. It just, I don't know, makes the activity of reading more premium. It makes it more worthwhile because you're enjoying it feels as if you're doing something important, right? Because when you write in an expensive journal, it's not expensive, but a premium looking journal, you write in a journal like that, inshallah, it is definitely, feels more premium, feels more worthy of your time, right? So invest in some good journals, inshallah. And yeah, so after all of this, this activity of reading and journaling, there's nothing much that these tools can do unless and until you get down to using your mind. You get to applying the potential of your own mind to these readings that you do. Unless you think hard and you question again and you question the question, the more deeper you can go, that's where your actual learning is concerned, is at. And then the idea of discussion. Journal is just a tool to see the thoughts and ideas personify, right? Visualize and sort of show themselves on screen, or sorry, in front of you, right? It's just a way of visualizing your ideas, right? So personification of ideas, when it appears on a paper, it helps you, let's say, make more visual sense of your thoughts. So seeing your thoughts on paper, seeing your thoughts as an entity on a paper, right, is just a tool, right? The deeper you can go into that, inshallah, the better you'll become as a learner, and your journal will show you that, right? The more lengthier and the more detailed your journal is, the more exertion you have put your mind to, right? And the better fruit of learning you'll acquire out of that, inshallah. Okay. Yes, inshallah. iPad is all fine, but as I said, inshallah, away from screens is ideal. But there's another thing you can do. The grammar stage reading, it doesn't necessarily have to happen on a physical journal. The grammar stage reading can actually happen just inside the book if you're clever about it. But let's stick to the journal, inshallah, for now. And ideally, away from iPads, away from screens, unless you don't have the book on you. use the iPad for reading and have a physical journal for writing down your notes, inshallah. Plus, there's actually scientific evidence that suggests that writing by hand is more effective for your mind and your memory. So you remember things better when you write things by hand. And I think writing on paper, it takes more effort, so it's more effective than writing on screens, inshallah. So that's just my personal preference, inshallah. But if it's working for you, then what's more important, as I said, is the thought and exertion of your mind, inshallah. Yeah, so Sister Hannah, that's all perfect, inshallah. Just carry on with that, inshallah. So use the book to annotate, and then you just transfer all of that onto the book, onto the journal. Very good. I've changed over the years. I tend to write my journal thoughts and things on the phone. Straight. Okay, inshallah. I just have this worry about getting them. See, there's some issue I have about written message. Yes. So a very good point here. Sister Connie says that there is a thing about getting your notes messy, right? Now these are all very I'm not sure if you have some sort of OCD, but a lot of people, including myself, I'm very OCD with my things, and I've never been officially diagnosed with OCD, but I'm very OCD with my things, and so I find myself in a similar thing where I don't want my notepads to be messy or dirty, which is why over the years I have, instead of writing out what do you call it, haphazardly, I would jot down bullet notes so that I can see the structure of it. So if you use a structure, and what you can do is also to save this inshallah, save this let's say so messiness is correlated to space, right? So space is, if you can reduce the space, like draw a line through the middle of the page, and then use bullet points to record your thoughts, for example, then that will inshallah try and help sort out this issue. Okay, and just think of inshallah, an organized manner to write down your notes. So first of all, reduce the space you write in, and then secondly, just try and bullet point your thoughts, right? Try and use lines, sections on a page to do that. Let me show you how I did it. Over time, you'll start being okay with it once you start writing in it, right? So think about, right? Just one moment. Okay, so look at this first, how neat this is and how big this is. It's covering the entire page. Each line is substantially larger than, say, as I've shown you guys before towards this side, right? However, I found that I didn't like the page being wasted. That's another extreme. So I started drawing lines in the middle, right? And then I started to bullet point my writings. And then what I did was I started drawing sections. So if I've, for example, written a note over here, I'll just draw a line, seal that off, and just continue into the next thing. And so reduce the space of it and then keep the structure roughly, and then draw a line and then carry on. So these are distinct sections, so it's not messy in that sense. So it's just a way to trick your mind to think, everything is under control, it's not messy, and it's all fine. But at the end of the day, really, the point is you're learning. This is your property. This is your journal. And no one's going to, give a dime about what you are reading or you're doing or how messy it is. It's just you have to make sense of it. So eventually, it's just a matter of bringing yourself to terms with, dealing with the messiness in China. So we've already spent 51 minutes, subhanAllah, talking about this journaling aspect of it, subhanAllah. And I think it's best that we jump into chapter 4 now. Okay. So chapter 4 is going to sort of essentially give us the crux of how she wants us to read a book. Now, all the strategies that are particular to different genres like history and poetry and autobiography and non-fiction and philosophy and whatever the case may be, all of those techniques and all of those strategies can vary person to person. And one of the things that she has not mentioned in the book, in fact, is the purpose behind reading a book. When you approach the book with a particular purpose, you don't have to use the same criteria. You don't have to use the same questions. You don't have to use the same, let's say, the breakdown that she suggests for different genres. Okay. Now, for example, if you and I, we were reading, let's say, Moby Dick, and we were reading it for a certain purpose of just improving our language. We have no concern, let's say, on how specifically the story develops, or what are the main characters. Even if we forget a lot of characters and we just remember the storyline roughly, but at the end of it, we have acquired a greater sense of how language is used to communicate, how you can improve your language abilities in terms of your own writing, how you've acquired new vocabulary and phrases and quotations to use in your own writings, for example, and phrases and figures of speech, metaphors and idioms and imageries. If that's the purpose you approach Moby Dick with, or Don Quixote as the first book that she recommends, then the purpose of your reading is not that extreme. It's not that, it doesn't have to be so pedantic. It doesn't have to be so arduous. Is that clear, inshallah? So the purpose of the book really determines, how you read it. So, which is why, as I said, chapter 4 is the most important chapter in the book. Okay, it's the most, like, you could stop reading the book at this stage and then start reading the books, right? And then only use the relevant chapters of the book as a rough guide to just remind yourself, okay, what tools do I need to read this more deeply? And that's it, right? In any case, one thing I want to comment on, inshallah, before I share the screen for chapter 4 and we sort of go through this together. Reading is learning, as we said, and it's going from a state of less understanding or knowing less and understanding less to a greater state of understanding, a higher state of understanding. So you understand less and then you move towards understanding more, right? So if you're reading something and it's not taking you to a higher level of understanding, a higher level of internalization of facts and a higher level of understanding the realities, right? Then you're doing the wrong kind of reading. Okay, you're doing the wrong kind of reading. And unfortunately, in our circumstance as Muslims, so many of Tulab al-Ilm, students of knowledge, and so many of the scholars, right, which have many years of serving the people in their localities and communities, they don't have the ability to actually read properly. Okay, they don't have the ability to read properly. And when I say read, I mean read like a faqih, read with depth, to such an extent where you can actually uplift your mind through that reading. So you're not reading just for facts. Reading for facts does not uplift your mind, because the whole point of reading is to level up your understanding of things, right? If you're just reading for facts and all you can do is talk about the book, but not what the book says. You can talk about the book, but not what the book says. You can't actually explain the book, right? Then that's a real a problem that we are facing as a community. We have many graduates from big names in the world, big institutions, MADINAH, Qura, AZHAR, Qarawiyin, many different highly valued seats of knowledge. right? And most graduates from these seats can best be classified as muqallideen, or even if, let's say, we don't touch that dichotomy of muqallideen fuqaha, mujtahideen and fuqaha, they are at best parrots, regurgitators of what they have wrote, memorized things. Okay? And that is a majority. Unfortunately, that is the case. And that is a reality. It's a harsh reality that we have to come to terms with. And this is why we're learning to read. Why we need to learn to read properly and with depth. So we elevate our levels of understanding. Okay? I want to show you a case study, which is relevant before we read chapter 4. Just bear with me. If I can sort of go towards the beginning of this page. Where are we? So this is a book which is second in line in our study. Inshallah, we're going to read this later. How to Read a Book, A Guide to Reading the Great Books by Adler. Adler is one of the finest scholars of the past century, the Western scholars of the past century. And he is a philosopher, an educationist, a reader, an author of many, many books. The point being that the man was a real thing, okay? And he was very, very highly accomplished in all of the things that he did. So this is a man who has such high accomplishments, right? In fact, over here, this is some praise from some Western authors for this man, who is the author of this book. He says, if any man in the world is qualified to write on the subject of reading, and particularly on the subject of reading great books, that man is Dr. Mortimer J. Adler. Dr. Adler is an eminent philosopher, a teacher, and the author of a number of bestsellers, including How to Read. His knowledge of the great books of history is unparalleled. In fact, he is, him and his colleague, I think one of the people who wrote a 10,000-page history of civilization, Van Doren, and so highly prolific author, right? And he authored this in Syntopicon. It's a book which is one of its kind. It's an index which indexes 3,000 years of ideas. If you want to read about a particular idea in any given field, just open this book, this index, and you can just sort of see where throughout history, in different literature, in different books, that idea has been discussed. So from Homer all the way to Kant and modern, thought leaders of the past century. Anyway, this man is highly accomplished, right? However, look at what he says about himself. After he became a PhD and started teaching in Columbia University, look what he says about the act of reading. Right. There we go. I did not discover I could not read until after I had left college. So that is after his PhD. I found it out only after I tried to teach others how to read. Most parents have probably made a similar discovery by trying to teach their youngsters. Paradoxically, as a result, the parents usually learn more about reading their children. The reason is simple, Right, to get back to my story. So far, as the registrar's records were concerned, I was one of the satisfactory students in my day at Columbia. We passed courses with credible marks. The game was easy enough once you caught on to the tricks. If anyone had told us then that we did not know much or could not read very well, we could have been shocked. We were sure we could listen to lectures and read the books assigned in such a way we could answer examination questions neatly. That was the proof of our ability. I mean, says much about the education system, really. Some of us took one course which increased our self-satisfaction enormously. I had just been started by John Erskine. It ran for 2 years, was called General Honors, and was open to a select group of juniors and seniors. It consisted of nothing but reading the great books, from the great classics through the Latin and medieval masterpieces, right down to the best books of yesterday. William James, Einstein, Freud. The books were in all fields. They were his histories and books of science or philosophy, dramatic poetry and novels. We read a book a week, some 60 in 2 years, and we discussed them with our teachers one night a week in informal seminar fashion. So just off the point, but this is something that you guys are doing at the moment, right? The Tajdeed Club essentially it follows the same university model of reading. However, look at this. The course had two effects on me. For one thing, it made me think I had struck educational gold for the first time, i.e., was, truly discovering good literature for the first time. Here was real stuff handled in a real way compared to the textbook and lecture notes that merely made demands on one's memory. But the trouble was, I not only thought I had struck gold, I also thought that I owned the mine. Here were the great books. I knew how to read. The world was my oyster. طيب, if after graduation I had gone into business or medicine, anyway, let's skip this bit a bit. Let's move on. As a student, I had read all the books. I was now going to teach, but being very young and conscientious, I decided to read them again, just to brush up each week for class. To my growing amazement, week after week, I discovered that books were almost brand new to me. I seemed to be reading them for the first time. These books, which I thought I had mastered thoroughly. As time went on, I found out not only that I did not know very much about any of these books, but also that I did not know how to read them very well. Who's saying this? The finest mind of the past century, one of the finest minds of the past century, and one of the most prolific readers of the past century, and authors of the past century. And this is after he already has a PhD. To make up for my ignorance and incompetence, I did what any young teacher might do who was afraid of both his students and his job. I used secondary sources, encyclopedias, commentaries, all sorts of books, about these books. In that way, I thought I would appear to know more than the students. They wouldn't be able to tell that my questions or points did not come from any better reading of the book the two were working on. Fortunately for me, I was found out, or else I might have been satisfied with getting by as a teaching just as I had got by as a student. If I had succeeded in fooling others, I might soon have deceived myself as well. My first good fortune was in having a Van Doren, as I mentioned, the poet, the famous author of the 10,000-page History of Civilization. In any case, the point being, as his journey as a teacher goes on, the man discovers that I did not know how to read. Okay. Yes, inshallah, I'll send the PDF. I'll send the PDF to the group, inshallah. Okay. So the man, the most prolific minds and the most prolific authors and philosophers of the past century, is saying after his PhD that I did not know how to read. Subhanallah. And this is the problem with our culture. Okay, this is the problem with our culture as well. So we want to beat that. We want to change that culture, right? We want to become prolific readers. We want to become deep readers, and readers who can actually extract information. Inshallah, I'll share the name. I'll share the book with you guys, inshallah, in the group chat. Okay, later after the seminar, inshallah. It's How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler. طيب. So I just wanted to comment on that. So this is something that we want to fix, right? This is something that we're trying to fix through our journey, the Tajdeed, Project Tajdeed, inshallah. So now we want to jump into chapter 4 and briefly have a look through the basic structure of it and then comment slightly on the main crux of it. Right. So you've already gone through the main structure of this chapter, I believe, right? Remind me quickly, what are the three main sections of this book that the author wanted you to identify in your grammar stage reading? Quickly, everyone. Yes, exactly. So when you guys, in your seminar as well, in your own personal readings, you went through the grammar stage, right? You broke down the chapter into its sections, and the author said that the chapter is divided into three sections, right? So you were supposed to do the homework and read through the chapter and identify those three sections. What are those three sections? Just give me those three sections in one or two lines each, roughly. what does the first section do? Explain. What does the second section tackle, and what does the third section tackle? We're dealing with the grammar stage of this chapter itself. Let me just scroll up to the first. Right. So this is chapter 4, starting to read. That's fine, Brother Khalid. The other students who've been doing the reading, sort of consistently, inshallah, they can give me some feedback, inshallah. I'm just asking, them to write down their thoughts on this. Okay, so don't worry, inshallah. It's just you'd have to go through the reading yourself, inshallah, to do this. But for the students who have done it, because this is a seminar, I'm not supposed to just give you the answers. Right. So section 1. Let's just go slowly, inshallah. Okay. Section 1. What is it? Section 1 asks you to do what, or describes, or sort of explains what. What is the first section tackling in chapter 4? Very good. It tackles the trivium, right? Very good. You don't need to go to specifics. That's the first thing. You've seen it describes the grammar stage to some detail, and then it describes you the rhetoric, the logic stage, and then the rhetoric stage to some detail, and that's and then essentially is the trivium. So trivium is the subject matter of the first section. Brilliant. What does the second section deal with? Yes, everyone. The second section, in just one word or just a phrase. Okay, can you be a bit more specific than that, sister? Okay, Sister Hannah, that's good, mashallah. That's good. That's a good try. Right, Sister Connie, well done. That's also correct, inshallah. So knowing your answer judgment is correct, whether your reasoning, your evaluation is correct, so that all of that is logic stage, right? So the second section is basically trying to give you some extra detail on the logic stage, because just very briefly, one of the problems that a lot of readers may sort of have when they're reading is, okay, right, we are obligated to evaluate things. We are supposed to think things through and critically about, the content that we're reading. Good. How do we know we're correct? How do we know we are right in our judgment, in our answers, in our, evaluation, right? So she gives you some practical tips. Good. So it's just a rough, let's say a note on the logic stage, right? She is just giving you some guidance on evaluation, or, just self-checking evaluation, right? That's fine, sister, inshallah. Right. What's the third section? Quickly. Is that correct? Is that the third section? The summary of the grammar stage? So this was the second section, right? And this is the third section, a note on the lists. So in the third section of this chapter is not the rhetoric stage. It's not the rhetoric stage. It's essentially a note on the lists that follow. She's just giving you a description of the reading list, the importance of reading through chronology, and how she has sort of structured the the proposed reading in the book. Okay, and some guidance through that, and that's it. Okay, and then there is the fourth thing, which is the summary of it all, right? The fourth step. Now, before we move on, well done to Sister Hannah, mashallah, and Sister Osab as well, for trying. And Sister Connie, it's not about the rhetoric stage, so we correct that, inshallah. Okay. However, before I say anyone is wrong or right, you could have very, let's say, I mean, you can very clearly see there's four headlines, there's four headings to this chapter, right? So if the author is saying there's 3 sections, but then she's put 4 headings inside a chapter, can we then not make and we are supposed to make the book our own, right? We're supposed to do the reading our own, in our own way, and we're supposed to break the book down in our own, how it makes sense to us, right? If we're supposed to do that, then surely it makes sense to break the book in 4 sections as opposed to 3. Would you guys agree to that? Right? One sister agrees, good. You don't have to agree with the division of the author, right? I mean, you can see 4 headings, so you could, let's say, let's just divide the chapter in 4 separate sections, right? So that's one thing. So the grammar stage and breaking down of chapters and breaking down a chapter or a book in its fundamental, let's say, compartments and sections, as there's no objective truth to it, right? There is close to objective breaking down of things. There's a very close to the correct grammar stage reading, but it's not like rocket science. It's not 2 + 2, right? In my personal understanding of it, I would have very easily divided this into 4 sections and not 3. And that would have made much more sense to me, because the author has decided to talk about 4 separate things. So she has given you a very detailed discussion on the 3 stages of reading. Then she has given you some extra advice on evaluation. Then she has felt important to give you some advice on and so her rationale behind the list and the chronology, and why it's important to read according to the chronology of ideas and books. And then before, a summary. Summary is a valid section in any chapter, right? So that's just a side point here. Just make it a mental note, inshallah. Don't be put off by anyone claiming to have the objective true answer to how reading is done, right? There is let's say a result of your reading that resembles to the best practice grammar stage, the best picture of a grammar stage reading of a proficient reader. Let's say someone who is a proper reader, he's professional, and they've done this job for many years, and then you do it, right? Of course, he has perfected the art of reading, so his grammar stage reading would be, let's say, as close to objectively true or correct or efficient as we can have it, right? Then you have a go at it. Now your breaking down of the chapter may not be as efficient as his, or as perfect as his or hers, right? But there's nothing to say that yours is wrong. The grammar stage is just about breaking down the book as it makes sense to you, because you're the one eventually who has to make sense of the book. It's you who's reading. It's you who is trying to elevate the understanding, right? So if it makes sense to you to do it in 2, if it makes sense to you to divide the whole chapter in 2 sections, makes sense. If it makes sense for you to divide the whole thing in 4 chapters, 4 sections, makes sense. That's perfectly all right. And if it makes sense to you to divide the whole thing in, let's say, 5 separate chapters, then 5 sections, then that's also correct as well. There's nothing wrong about it. Okay, there's nothing wrong about it. But there's, as we've always said, best practices, inshallah. So, alhamdulillah, that's the grammar stage of That's the first step in the grammar stage with, as well, right? So let's now go back. In fact, let me just scroll up quickly. And let me bring in my notepad, if I quickly can. Right. Can you see the notepad on the side, the Apple Notes on the side here? On the screen, can you see it? Right, let me share the screen again quickly. Let me share the screen again. Where are we? We're 1 hour, 16 minutes. Oh, la ilaha illallah. Okay, it seems it's not going to work. Okay, طيب, let's just stick to our PDF here. Let me just I should have sent one here. Okay, so we're back here, inshallah. طيب. So now that you've defined your 3 sections, let's start breaking down the sections one by one. But before we do that, let's quickly have a look at the summary that she's given us towards the end, because that's where she has sort of summarized everything for us, right? So it makes sense to have a start at that. So the 4th step is to putting everything into one place, right? So she gives you 6 principles govern the first stage of reading. So you plan on reading each book more than once. So that's one of the principles of classical reading, because the books you're reading, they're important books. They're not magazines or newspapers, So any book that is worth reading is at least worth reading 3 times, as Adler says. So these 3 separate readings don't have to be 3 separate readings. I mean, a proficient reader, a very expert reader could do all those 3 readings, the grammar, the rhetoric, the logic, and the rhetoric stage reading in one go. But even then, the great books which have had an impact, they have such a treasure trove of ideas and value that it's best to always plan to read these books more than once. Right. So that's just one of the given things, okay? That we'll take that distracting question, towards the end, Brother Khalid. Right. In the Islamic tradition, the ulama, they always mention to have khatmas, right? Like we do the khatma of the Quran. We talked about the khatma of the Quran, right? How we have the listening khatma, we have the reading khatma, we have the reading of the khatma of the tadabbur, and we have the khatma of memorization and revision, right? Of the Quran. And the Quran is the greatest book. It's Kalamullah Azza wa Jal. So we read it again and again. So to ponder over the meanings, we stand with it in the qiyam and so on and so forth, right? So there's 5 types of khatma we can do with the Quran. And I once advised the students that, you stick to all 5 of them to the best of your abilities and, to your, within your time schedules, right? Especially the Hufaz. The same principle applies to the Sunnah, right? You should be at least trying to read a comprehensive book on Sunnah, like Imam Bukhari's Jami', Sahih Bukhari, in whatever translation, or the original Arabic, whatever language you're comfortable with at this stage, inshallah, to have that as a constant read. So you read again and again, and then you finish again. The ulama, they would finish the Kutub al-Sittah once a year, right? They would aim to finish all the 6 books of hadith once a year, and then the next year there would be the same thing. One of our mashayikh, his practice is to finish reading Zad al-Ma'ad once a year, right? And Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, he would advise the students, and Sheikh Uthman Khamis from Kuwait, he advised his students that upon the advice of Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, that Zad al-Ma'ad should be a book that you should read from every single day. This is a book that you should read every day. It's a book that you should revisit every single time, because it's one of the great books of our tradition. Just like Imam al-Bukhari's Sahih and in the Tafsir you have the Imam Tabari's Tafsir, for example, right? As such, we don't apply that to the Western tradition as Muslims. We don't want to be reading the Western great books, because they're not really great books according to our paradigm. But because they have had ideas and impact on the world, we are forced as an obligation, from our tradition, to understand the world that we live in, to read these works. But we're not going to be reading these books again and again and again, right? And not more than, more beyond the necessary need of extracting the ideas from them, understanding and our intention of reading them is very different from someone who's trying to liberally educate themselves, to have a liberal education, a classical education. Our goal is to understand the world we live in and then apply the Sharia in it. That's the purpose of our education and reading these great books, right? Understand how the civilization has evolved, and how we have come into being where we are in this state of history, and how and where we are likely to head in the future. All of these things are sort of dictated with the forces that are, sort of dictating these things. And these forces essentially have some sort of philosophy, some sort of driving force and ideas behind them. That's why we read these books. And so our intentions are very clear. So anyway, planning on reading each book once is not going to cut it. Important books are going to need that time from you. And then when you start reading, the first thing which she's going to mention is you don't, beyond just highlighting the structure of the book, which is not going to take you more than 5-7 minutes, which she doesn't really, so she doesn't actually talk about that in the book, but we went through this in one of our first seminars. Before you just start reading, and reading as it is, just reading for fun and not stopping to look up words and understanding difficult things, just everything that she recommends in the basic grammar stage, it really helps if you can spend 5 to 6 minutes before you start reading to really build a good skeleton of the chapter by skimming through the chapter. These are advanced techniques that inshallah Mortimer Adler, he talks about in his books. And then there's more advanced techniques that we've learned from our ulama in our tradition that inshallah we'll learn as we read books together. طيب, inshallah. So he says you plan on reading each book more than once, so the 3 stages. You have that idea, so you read it with that in mind, that you're going to revisit this book. It's not the only reading. It's not the only time you're going to be reading this book. So underline or mark passages that you find interesting or confusing. Turn down the corners of difficult sections. Jot your questions in the margin. Just underline, mark corners, mark passages, interesting things, questions. Just have that little communication, just that surface level communication with the book, and just keep moving. The point is to keep moving and not get bogged down by any difficult thing. Not difficult words, not difficult passages, not difficult vocabulary or ideas or thought. Just keep reading, because a lot of these things they get explained later on in the book as you develop. Right, before you begin, read the title page, the copy on the back, and the table of contents. We've already done this when we started this book, if you guys remember. In one of our first seminars, we tried to determine the social context and the objectives of the author and her presumptions and her ambitions behind writing this book, right? And when we read through the title page and the back of the book and so on and so forth, the table of contents. So we did that in practice in one of the first seminars, inshallah. If you want to revisit, just go and watch the recording of one of those seminars, inshallah. And then at the end of each chapter or section, write down a sentence or 2 that summarizes the content. Remember not to include details. This will come later, but because we're going to dig deeper into the skeleton of the book in the interpretation stage, i.e. the logic stage of things. As you read, use your journal to jot down questions that come to your mind. And as we've said, you can actually do this in the book itself, in number 2. Or just, as you're developing the skeleton of the book, you can just do it in the margins. Whatever the case may be. The point is that you are just reading things that you don't understand. You underline, you question mark, any thoughts, just write down in the margins. So you have the basic skeleton. Then you are just reading without getting bogged down and slowing down. Just continue reading without looking things up. And anything that's difficult, a question mark on it. Any passage that needs revisiting, underline. Any word that needs looking up, underline. And any interesting ideas in the margin, any questions in the margin. And anything that is extra of that nature, just do that in the margin or on the sides of the journal, right? Just go through that. And each time you finish a section, and even within the section, you can start summarizing things very early on, right? So summarize in 1 or 2 lines the purpose of a chapter or a section, and so on and so forth. And then towards the end, once you've gone through one chapter in that way, just organize all of that in summarize these sentences into an informal outline, and then give the book a brief title and an extensive subtitle. So this is her prescription. As we've said, when we approach a book with a certain mindset, we can skip some of these steps. We may not want to assemble all our summary sentences into an informal outline and then give the book a brief. So long we understand there's a structure to the book, and so long we understand what the book is about, and so long we can answer certain key questions in our minds after just the grammar stage of things. If you notice, we drew this note over here. What is classical education? What is reading? What are the tools required for tackling the great books? If you've sort of done that kind of thing and these little summaries of each section, each subsection, and each point, if you've done that, right, then you've essentially, achieved your purpose, and you don't need to repeat the process or do this extra step. It'll waste time. It only needs to be done with certain books, inshallah. Right? So this is you owning the book, you making the book your own. Right? You're giving it the title that makes sense to you, and you're giving it a subtitle that makes sense to you. And you are going to be giving it a title in a sense where the title actually describes the book or the chapter, and the subtitle gives a little description of the chapter, right? And then each of the sections, it's just like a skeleton with a little bit of nerve endings and a little bit of muscle, right? Just that little thing. So when you look at it, it's a human being. Or when you look at it, it's an animal, it's a dog, or it's a cat, or I hope you get the point, right? And then she just gives you the steps for the next thing, and then she ends. Right. Let's move back now, inshallah. Let's move back to the top of the chapter. Where is it? There we go. Right. So the first section is about describing the trivium. She's going to describe the 3 stages of reading in depth. Now, to break down this chapter, and I want you guys to take notes now, inshallah, because I'm not able to show that on the screen here. But what I will do is I will start typing, and I can share the notes with you towards the end. What we can do is I can share the notes with you and just have the right. Can everyone see this, inshallah? I'll just enlarge this, inshallah. Describing the trivium approach to reading. This is my description or title of the section. The subtitle of it would be how to conduct the grammar, logic, and rhetoric stage of reading. Okay. Now, of course, the first thing is going to be the grammar stage. The second thing is going to be the logic stage. And number 3 is going to be the rhetoric stage. Okay. Brother Khalid, inshallah, I'll answer the questions towards the end, okay? Just keep the questions for towards the end, inshallah. Right. So just going to tackle this section 1. Section 3 is roughly straightforward. So section 2 is where she's going to tell you, how to test your evaluation. Also, logic stage of reading. Okay. And then you give it a subsection, which is, let's say, so how to test your evaluation could be a title for the section, and then we could say, let's say, I don't know. Let's say quickly have a look. So this is yep, ways to go about it. Of correcting your ideas as you read. Okay. Validating your ideas. So how to test your evaluation, reading, ways to go about self-correcting or validating your ideas as you read. Okay. So that's your second section. And of course, section 3 is just her advice on, following things through chronology. And we've had a long discussion on that in the last seminar as well. So we'll just stick to going through this quickly, inshallah. Yes, so meeting the people, testing and tips. Yes, so testing and tips would be better. And the meeting with people would just be a very sub point of that, right? So the main point is, ways to go about validating your ideas, just to make sure that how do you know that you're correct in your thinking, that you're not, developing perverse ideas, as she says, you're not developing any completely wrong ideas. Okay, so let's move now to the grammar stage of things. Let's go back onto the page. Okay. So to begin this section, she does advise you to, just stick with one list as opposed to saying, oh, I have this all-out ambitious plan to read all the great books. She says that's not going to work. Just stick to one list at a time. So small targets. That's just a productivity advice. That's all good, inshallah. And then she says, as you read each book, you'll follow the pattern of the trivium. First, you'll try to understand the basic structure and the argument. And then next, you evaluate the book. And then you finally form your own opinion about the book's ideas. So she's just summarizing what you're going to be doing. Okay. Now, she does give us a note, which is important. And I've actually mentioned this in my, let me just open it here in front of me. Notes. That how you evaluate things, right, is going to be slightly different for each genre. So just as a note here in logic stage, just as a little, just put it as a point which is not yet connected with anything. Evaluation will look different for each for each genre. So evaluation is not going to be this. It's not going to be the same for each type of book. When you're reading history, you're fact checking. You're saying you're looking at the credibility of the author's research, his points, his arguments. Is he being unbiased? If he's impartial with his research, or is he trying to push a certain case, as is the problem with Orientalism, right? So you're fact checking. You're saying, is it accurate? Is it true? So that's a different type of evaluation, right? But when you're evaluating a novel, you can't really say a novel is wrong or it's untrue. It's just a story, right? So your evaluation of that would be, okay, are the paradigms, the characters, their development, the storyline, the climax at the end, all of that, was that a true reflection of a great author? So your evaluation of that would be different, right? So evaluation has to be done. It's a critical stage for any reading, but it looks different for each genre, right? So grammar stage, coming back to it. Okay, so in the grammar stage, she says, when you first read through a book, don't feel that you have to grasp completely every point the writer is making. The secret to reading a difficult book is simply this: keep reading. And towards the end, she has a quote from Adler, the book that we looked at earlier. Understanding half of a really tough book is much better than not understanding it at all, which will be the case if you allow yourself to be stopped by the first difficult passage you come to, right? So again, the same idea as to just keep going. Just read and keep reading. That's the first thing. So just read and keep reading. That's the first tip, essentially, in the simplest of terms. What she means by that, we can dig deeper into that later. Okay? Your first reading is your handshake with the book. Your goal is to finish with a surface acquaintance. The next point is underline in your books, jot notes in the margins, and turn the corners of your pages down. Public education is a beautiful dream. So the second point is essentially interacting with the book. Interact with the book by all those things that we've mentioned, corners or post-it notes to identify different sections, different arguments. Again, the questions, the underlining of the different difficult passages, interesting quotations, question marks for difficult, for things that you don't understand yet. And all those things, essentially, right? That's your interaction with the book. You have to interact with the book. Okay. She does say that if you're using library resources, don't write in it. However, I've actually been notorious, and I've had a very, I used to write in library books with a very noble intention. My intention used to be, well, this is a book which is public property and people are going to come and read it after me. So if I read it and left my commentary in the book, which is, of course, is going to be very helpful for anyone who comes after me, because there's many difficult things in the book and I've solved half their reading time, made their life easier reading this book. Surely they'll thank me. So with that intention, with that noble intention and niyyah, I would actually scribble in library books. And I'm sure I would have had haters in the library team, for doing that. However, I don't recommend you guys do that. However, if you do want to do it, what you can do is you can still scribble in library books, but do so in pencil, right? It just, and once you're done with the book, just take out all of that into a journal, and then you can erase everything very easily from the book if you must. But I don't think any librarian ever, from all my years of readings in the library, no one ever complained about me writing in pencil in the book because they could just erase it later. It's permanent writing that's difficult. In fact, I actually came across some books which people had written into. Anyway, in any case, sorry. Interacting with the book is important. So you just keep reading and you keep interacting with the book, inshallah. طيب. But you have to, make the book your own. That's the important thing. You have to make the book your own. You have to be intimate with the book, right? Be intimate with the book. Okay, inshallah. So that's the main crux of her second point. The third point, when she says, when you first begin to read a book, read the title page, the copy on the book, do not automatically read the preface and then she gives you some advice on reading the preface or not reading the preface. I actually recommend reading the preface all the time. Because her advice, how she said, when she says, in the case of a nonfiction book, the preface may set the book in context for you, summarize the argument, and tell you just why the book is so important. That's valuable. But the preface can also give you an interpretation before you even read the book, something to be avoided. So, for example, So generally, you should read the preface only if it has been written by the author or translator personally. I don't agree with that. I have a very beautiful history of mathematics. It's more than 1,000 pages, and its introduction was remarkable, right? And it was written by this mathematician and educationist, and he mentions some very important and golden principles of education, right? And especially education of mathematics and self-education into in higher years of your life, older years of your life, right? So I don't agree with that anyway. But the point is, her third point is that when you first read a book, make sure you get a good gist of it by reading the title, the back page, the contents page, all of that, and then just move on. The third point is get a good gist of the book, a rough picture, so to speak, right? Picture of the book. All right. And then you move on. Number 4 is don't take extensive notes on a first reading. First reading notes tend to be far too detailed. You'll find yourself writing down many observations that seem important but later prove to be irrelevant. And all the note taking will slow you down. Instead, stop at the end of each chapter to jot down a sentence or two in your journal. These sentences should summarize. So essentially, don't make this reading too deep. Take shallow notes. Briefly summarize sections or chapters towards the end in 1 or 2 lines each, etc. Okay, so we already talked about this anyway, but so her next point essentially is jot down questions that come to mind, record your disagreements or agreements with the writer, scroll down any reflections, questions, disagreements, reflections, summaries. All of that essentially is this. Interact with the book, make the book your own, be intimate with it. All of that this is point number 5 is just repetition. And then number 6 is when you've finished your first reading, go back and assemble. So the next point would be to assemble your first reading into a skeleton of sorts of the book. So once you've assembled your first reading into this kind of skeleton, you know the main points, you know the main chapters, you know where the majority of the ideas and the crux of it is sort of buried. So this allows you, the skeleton allows you to pick on individual bones and ligaments, right? As we've said, this is important. Do you need to have a skeletal sort of view of the book, but you don't need to combine everything, into in your own words and do it separately. You could just do it briefly as we're just doing over here quickly. And that's more than enough. You don't need to do it towards the end. We're just doing it as we're going along in practice. طيب. So that's just your grammar stage, and you can make your grammar stage when we talk about, inshallah, when we read the next books, when we talk about and in practice as well, when we actually read books in this level, the analytical level, the grammatical stage, the grammar stage of things, you can do this very, very efficiently. There's higher techniques, there's better techniques you can follow, inshallah, because all of this is very vague. It's very general, right? Just read and keep reading is good, mashallah. But then you can say, okay, what if I've broken down my book into targets? I'm following a curriculum. I don't need to read the book, keep reading the book, right? I know my teachers, I have a trust in my teachers, so I can then use this book if I'm just reading this book as a curriculum, then it makes sense to, not just read and read and read the whole book, but rather if 1 week is chapter 1, then I don't need to keep reading the rest of the chapters. I can just focus on read the chapter 1 first, right? And in that, try and underline all the words and interact with the book and do. Does it make sense? So I can take a pause. I can read one chapter deeply, do the logic stage of it, and the rhetoric stage of it, chapter wise. I don't need to do this for the whole book. Okay? Because we've done a rough skimming of the whole book quickly. We've done that already, right? Then we start with chapter by chapter based, right? In sort of manner. So then we can sort of do this grammar stage, logic stage, and rhetoric stage all in one chapter. So in any case, being more advanced means that you have a purpose behind it, and our purpose is to follow this book as a curriculum. We're studying this book as a curriculum over 3-4 months, so we don't need to rush through things, and we have a slightly different mechanism towards it, so we can apply higher techniques. So interaction with the book can have so many forms, right? Marking the corners, post-it notes, structure putting a structure to the book, questions, difficult passages, difficult books, difficult words, all of that. That is all one part of interacting with the book, right? There's a higher interaction with the book that you can also have in this grammar stage, where you're always having a communication between, a rough communication between each section. So you could be summarizing each paragraph. Okay, so I've read this paragraph. What does it mean? Just from your memory. So you incorporate recalling, active recall into your reading. That's another level of things, inshallah. So the point being that at this stage, you get a very good picture of, mashallah, what a grammar stage reading is. Let's move on to evaluation, inshallah. Rhetoric is a given. Rhetoric is just discussing, and we'll just briefly comment on it later, briefly towards the end, inshallah, and then we'll call it a day. With logic, she says that, it's going to differ for, different genres of books, right? The questions become different, and the expectations are different for each genre. But the procedure is still the same. She says, go back and reread those sections of the book that you identified as difficult. Can you make better sense of them now that you've arrived at it? So this first thing essentially is go back, make sense of now you have more time now. You can, of the difficult passages, look up words, answer questions. that came while reading. Okay, so you go back and reread those sections of the book that you identified as difficult, right? Make sense of difficult passage, look at words, answer questions that came up while reading. Identify which chapters / sections are the most important. Okay, and so on and so forth. So then she says to dig deeper into the book's structure. If you remember, I alluded to this in one of our earlier seminars, one of our first seminars into this. You know, once you have a good structure, you can dig deeper. The better structure you can build of a book, the deeper you can penetrate into the mind of the author, and the deeper you can penetrate into the ideas you're grappling with. Okay, so dig deeper into the book's structure. That's the second thing now. Dig deeper into the book's structure. Now you're going to sort of start looking at, you know, the muscles of it and the finer particles and the molecules and the layers of protein and so on and so forth. Right. Now, the third thing is to ask genre relevant questions. Each type of genre, history is going to have has its specific questions. You know, literature, which is fiction, or just you know, a literary masterpiece like Charles Dickens or whatever the case may be. These kinds of genres will have a separate, you know, different you know, evaluation will look different for each genre, right? So the questions are different, but ask general relevant questions and try and answer them. Try and answer these specific questions. These specific critical questions. So the logic stage is essentially specifically about those critical questions, right? Then she says, number 4 is, how well did the writer succeed? Did he or she successfully carry out his intention? If not, why? Where did he fall short? Are his facts da 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 da? So this is where you are critiquing. Critique the author. Find holes in arguments, in their argument. Okay? Fact check. Test their conclusions. Do their conclusions stand? Right? What else? But essentially, that's essentially it, right? So that's your logic stage, right? And because the nature of this chapter essentially is very descriptive and it's procedural, and she's just giving you a recipe. I'm not going to, there's so much we can talk about, right? As we've said, we can go deeper and we can start pinpointing, you know, where, you know, we can, you know, challenge her on certain assumptions, where we can improve her prescription, where we can improve her technique of reading, for example. And inshallah, over time, as we read the next book, inshallah, when you combine the ideas of reading all these different stages, inshallah, in you know, through these 2 books that we're going to read, inshallah, you will have a better idea of how reading can be done on various levels. Okay, and then guided by your purpose behind reading a book, right? You can choose to leave off certain things and then do certain things, you know, with that book that are more relevant to your purpose. Sometimes you don't have to, you know, do this kind of, you don't have to agree or disagree with the author. You don't have to, right? You don't even have to, you know, go beyond the point of, you know, digging deeper into the books. So long you know what the gist is, you know what the arguments are, and you can use them in your research, because you're writing a separate piece of research. You're writing you're writing on a topic, and that topic specifically does not require you to break down the book and then engage with that book in this manner, right? You don't have to. So there are intentions, and those intentions guide your reading strategy. So this is not a prescription which is objectively binding on you. It can be changed. You can pick up certain things. For example, certain times you don't even need to do the grammar stage. You don't need to. Certain books are just meant to be, so long you know there's 10 chapters and you know roughly that this chapter is talking about this, you can just keep reading and just, anything that strikes you, just make a note of that at the end of the book. However, that's a shallow type of reading. We have to admit that. When you're just collecting quotations and anything that strikes you and just noting down that's a shallow type of reading, right? We have to admit that. However, some books demand that, especially when you're researching, when you're collecting facts for a topic, right? If I'm writing a book on redefining education and I'm going through different education models, one of the first things I'm going to be doing is not to start, reading books on, IB diplomas, international baccalaureate, or IB, B Tech or A levels or the Cambridge or O levels or whatever the case may be, and then start, evaluating all those things. No, the first thing would be my book demands from me that I first of all describe what they are. So I'll just go through the books just to my initial reading from those books, from the literature that is available on these models, would be to collect information that describes these models. Okay. And then once I've described the models, I already have my research from separate areas that I can then connect to this and then try and critique it without having to critique each of those separate books or that separate piece of literature that sort of discusses each of these models, right? So that's syntopical reading. Then in evaluation stage, there is a higher level learning. So that there's a higher level of learning where you start to connect what you're learning, what the ideas you're dealing with in this particular book, you start to connect it to other domains in your life, in other fields of study. You try and sort of make a network, a neural network of ideas in your mind, right? So if you're reading a book on let's say human rights, good, and you're reading on something, a book on that topic, and then say you're reading the Universal Charter of Human Rights, and you come to this stage of you're digging deeper into the book structure and you're asking the relevant questions on the philosophical questions behind each of the rights asserted in that charter. Something which is not directly relevant to that could be the wider relevance of those clauses to the various other fields of life, such as giving women the right to have abortion whenever they want, an unsolicited, free right, and an unequivocal, categorical right to have abortion. If you allow that if you say that's a human right, what economic repercussions of that could be? How does economy, and then so you bring in your knowledge of economy and anything that you read on economy into that. So connecting with other pieces of knowledge that you have in your mind. So these are all stages of evaluation, because only then you can truly and honestly evaluate things and find holes in the arguments and try and make sense of things and agree or disagree. And then rhetoric stages to start to express your opinions, right? Express your disagreements. I'll just mention this quickly. Expressing your opinion. And the author, she does it in four different, a few separate questions. He says, what does the writer want me to do? What do they want me to believe or experience? And then, am I convinced that I must do or believe what the writer wants me to do? So, for example, are we, up till this stage, are we clear on what the writer wants us to do? Yes, she wants us to read a book with an adequate level of depth, right? With an adequate mechanism, right? That allows us to sort of unravel the layers of meaning within a book. We're clear with that. طيب. The writer wants me to believe that classical education is the best form of education because that's what she's propelling. She's written how many pages? She's written almost 450 pages to do what? To convince me that this is the best form of education, classical education. Am I convinced about that? Why am I not convinced about that? Then I can discuss it, right? So you expressing your opinions via in-person dialogue, seminar, as we're having right now, right? We could have, emails, or if you're old-fashioned, letters with colleagues and whatnot. And then another form of rhetoric stage would be to write research essays, right, on that topic, just like it happens in the tutorial system, as practiced in Oxford and Cambridge. Each week, the professors, they assign you one or two essays that you have to write. And for each of those essays, you have to read 2 or 3 books, right, to sort of just tackle that essay. So they put an account, so they make the rhetoric stage an accountability mechanism. So you have to submit that essay, and you have to face your tutor once a week or every two weeks. So for that, you have to read a piece of 500 pages for that essay. For each essay, it's roughly 500 pages that you have to read each week or every 2 weeks. So you're forced to read everything in this kind of manner. However, what happens ends up happening in practice is, because of making this the end goal, the expression the end goal, the Oxford and Cambridge education system, it falls into the trap of shallow learning, reading as much as is necessary for writing an essay. I have sometimes written essays that have taken me half an hour without having read any of the 500 pages or 600, 700 pages that were assigned to us, right? And go and discuss it with my tutor and come out of the seminar with the teacher thinking I read a lot. So that's, and I know, honestly speaking, I had not read. I had not done these two things. So I was not actually educated on that topic. I just put some facts together and used my intelligence to just sort of curate a last-minute response, a last-minute expression of what I thought were the ideas. But when you actually read literature, right, your thoughts develop, and you truly understand how important it is to read the books, or at least research the books, that topic over a long period of time, so that you don't have a blind spot to information, to knowledge. Okay, so the last thing is to express your opinions via in-person dialogue like we're having at the moment, seminars, tutorials, emails between, letter exchanges, email exchanges between colleagues and friends and students, and then eventually writing essays. This is something, inshallah, that I want to incorporate at some point in our studies, inshallah. I would like you guys to start writing essays like we do in universities, like Oxford model, where you write essays, then we go through those essays individually, inshallah. But hopefully, this is something that we can incorporate at some point later. Right, now just briefly to comment on the note on evaluation. Coming back to her, coming back to the book. That's all she has essentially described in her evaluation. How do you know whether you've gotten the right answers? She gives you a few ways, right? Well, 2 ways primarily. She says over here, you have 2 safeguards: your reading partner, who will listen to your ideas and tell you whether they're coherent, and the practice of quoting. So yes, so comment on this. This is the crux of her argument. So the way you know your ideas are correct is if you share those ideas with someone. if you don't share your ideas with someone, you're never going to know how coherent or how authentic or how accurate your ideas are. However, depending on where your friend or your colleague that you're sharing the ideas with, your reading partner, depending on how well educated they are, depending on that, your ideas might pass without being corrected. So if you're reading with a well-trained tutor, like it happens in Oxford and Cambridge, and like it should happen in normal Islamic seminaries, and it has happened in our history where, the Tulab al-Ilm, students of knowledge, they study with the ulama, and the ulama, they correct the aqidah. When they read books, they always come back, like even me, even now, I always go back to the ulama to discuss my readings with them, right? Because this procedure, it's a part of life. You're going to continue for the rest of your life reading, because as one of the great ulama of our time, Sheikh Turayfi, hafidhahullah, he mentions that the ulama, they're not going to give you much. All they give you are keys. It is still your duty to go back and dig into the books. You have to use those keys that they provided you, right? And then dig deep into the books. So you have to do the hard work. You're not going to acquire ilm if you don't put in the hard work yourself. It is your duty to educate yourself, not the teacher's duty to put facts in your mind. You're not going to get ilm on a you're not going to be fed ilm through a silver spoon, right? Subhanallah. There's a statement by, I believe, Hassan al-Basri. I don't recall exactly, but he said, one of the Salafis, they said that the ilm used to be in the hearts of men, and then books were written, and now the ilm is in the books, but the keys are still with the scholars, right? The keys are still with the men, the ulama. So the point of an author, of a scholar, of an alim, is to guide you, to first give you the tools of reading, and then when you embark on your education, self-guided guided education of your reading and all that for the rest of your life, you meet with them regularly, and you discuss your readings with them, and you bounce off your ideas as you're developing. And when you write things, you share your essays and your readings with them, and writings with them, right? And they comment on it, they correct it, because they're more knowledgeable than you in that field, and they can correct you where your ideas are wrong. So that's the first thing. I'd like to challenge her on that. That these not just having a reading partner. Just a reading partner is not the safeguard. However, it does help you think through your ideas a bit more clearly. And then the second thing she mentioned is practicing quoting. It's like when you actually, so you have an idea, right? That this topic means such and such, X, Y, and Z things. If you can quote something in reference to that, it solidifies your understanding. And so your ideas sort of find a backing. It becomes a bit more objective in that sense, right? However, again, there's a problem of interpretation. You quote something and you understand it to mean something, but then a more well-versed reader, a more seasoned reader will find flaws in your understanding of the same quoting, same quote, same quotation, same passage. So interpretation. Again, the whole thing comes down to you being refined by the scholars. There's nothing that replaces the scholars. This is why liberal education, liberal arts education, classical education in the Western, according to the Western model, is a flawed education model. It is very easy for readers to develop heretical ideas. Do you think Karl Marx was not classically educated? Leibniz was not classically educated? Hegel, Kant, were these scholars not classically educated? The problem was that there is no paradigm that corrects them objectively. Only Islam can do that, and only people who are scholars of that field, ulama, of aqidah and fiqh and lugha, this is the class of ulama that you need to go back to, right? Unfortunately, that class of ulama who are really seasoned, well-read ulama, who are thinkers, who are actually, fuqaha, that class of ulama has decreased a lot. You can still find good teachers, mashallah, but their class of ulama has decreased. So your reading partner should ideally, or at least your group should be guided, inshallah, by someone. Even if you have a general discussion between your reading partner, you should have someone on top of you guys to guide that discussion, to correct that understanding and ideas according to Islam, according to Aqidah, according to right understanding of the Salaf al-Salihin, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the robust method. This is the only robust methodology. The only objective Furqan is the Quran and Sunnah, and those who understand it upon the manhaj of the Salaf al-Salihin, right? They are the only pioneers that you need to stick to, and this is the only. So the point is that you reread, inshallah, we develop ideas, and then we correct those ideas according to Islam. This is the whole point of Tajdeed Club, is essentially that. We want to educate ourselves comprehensively, yes, but according to Islam. We don't want to corrupt our minds and our belief systems when we read these books. The point is to critique them according to Islam, so we know that Islam is the truth, and then we can challenge these things, because in the West, unfortunately, these are the dominant ideas. If we don't read these things and then challenge them according to Islam, we're never going to be able to feel confident in our identity living in these lands as du'at. Okay, inshallah. So we'll stop over there, come back to the screen, inshallah, and we'll take your questions now, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So just reading through your questions. So Brother Khalid had some questions. Let me just take his questions now. Right. Do men like reading more or ladies? I think that's just subjective. Allahu alam. I wouldn't know. Any thoughts from the sisters on this? Do men like reading more or ladies? I think this is a very subjective thing to ask, right? Everyone has different preferences. Brother Khalid, you asked, you teach Mishkat al-Masabih. I'm thinking doing same methodology. Will that be good? Can you please elaborate on that? What specifically are you talking about? How are you thinking of doing it? Inshallah.
السلام عليكم أستاذ.
وعليكم السلام.
يا أستاذ الكريم الفاضل. Ustad, basically, I'm just asking, like, in terms of our dini books that we teach or we're reading, the trivium method and all these other methods, should we use that in hadith, or, I mean, I don't know. I mean, will it work? Or will it work more with history books, or more with maybe, I don't know, I mean, can we really apply that to fiqh books, or maybe hadith books, or,
yeah,
or maybe even tafsir, Ustad, because I was just thinking with tafsir, every maybe Mufassir, he has his own kind of why he's written it or something. I don't know, Ustad, if you can elaborate, inshallah.
Yeah. Very good question. So you have to understand, all of these trivium, this grammar stage, logic stage, rhetoric stage, all of it is, it's just a smart way of reading. So let's say you're reading, I don't know, Surah Al-Baqarah, right? So let's just say the Quran. You're reading the Quran. Are you not going to first understand how many chapters there are? Okay, there's 114 chapters. Good. You know the names. Okay. Can you, in one or two lines or 3 lines, just describe the motive of each surah? Good. All of this is grammar stage, right? You're just developing a skeleton of the book, and then filling in that skeleton, slowly going deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And then you can sort of come back and say, look, okay, now I'm going to go into the Surah Baqarah. So Surah Baqarah is 2.5 juz, brilliant. Has so how many ahzab does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and 4.5, right? Roughly. So 4.5 ahzab, 4 and 5, so almost 5 ahzab, right? So that's good structure. And then you say, okay, طيب, it starts off with the Jews, and then it goes on to Munafiqun, right? And then some passages. So you're developing a skeleton. This is applicable to any type of reading, any type of book. Let's say you're analyzing, you're reading the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ. So if you're analyzing this hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَىٰ فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته إلى الدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه متفق عليه. So you can break, this is a hadith, right? We know Mishkat al-Masabih is divided into chapters. Each book has subtopic of that. So Kitab al-Tahara has sub chapters, and then each chapter is divided into three things, right? One section only describes the most authentic hadith from Bukhari and Muslim. طيب. The second, more authentic, and then the third one, which are generally from the other sources which are disagreeable in them in terms of the authenticity, right? So you have the skeleton in mind. Now you're reading إنما الأعمال بالنيات with your students. Can you say to them, who is the author? This is Umar ibn Khattab. There is a version of it from Abu Hurairah as well. Let's just say Umar radiallahu anhu. طيب. Right. What are the key components of this hadith? There are إنما الأعمال بالنيات. That's the first component. طيب. Second, وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. That's the second component. The first thing and second thing are not the same thing. They're not expressing the same idea. Good. Third thing is an elaboration of it by example, right? فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So the first type of hijrah is for Allah, which is the acceptable type of niyyah, for Allah's sake, for His religion. Then the fourth thing is for any niyyah which is not for the sake of Allah and not for the sake of His deen. So you have essentially built the skeleton of this hadith into 4 sections, right? And in fact, subhanAllah, if you read the commentary on this hadith by Imam Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, he divides this hadith into chapters, right? And each of the chapters are essentially these sections. And then each of these sections, he divides them according to the scholarly debate on these sections. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And the إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, there's two separate discussions on it. So he sort of divides that. So you see the skeleton, it's everywhere, right? So it's a highly, highly effective way of teaching the students. And in fact, it teaches the students to be effective with their own reading. And it actually helps the students memorize, understand things better, because they can then apply this with any type of knowledge. If they're listening to a lecture, they can automatically start categorizing the lecture into a structure in their own minds. And that way, when they walk away from that lecture, they would have learned so much more than if they were just listening and they just catch one thing here and another thing over there. So definitely something they should do, inshallah.
Just one question. I just wanted to mention, I remember going to, I think it's in England, Marksfield, there was a university, there was a lecture, and Ustad, I felt like crying because I didn't even understand a word. I felt so embarrassed, and I said to myself, why did I go? Why did I bother? I didn't even understand. All I was doing, Ustad, was I was just drawing pictures on the pad because I didn't understand. It was so high level English, so I just didn't get. I just didn't understand it. And now, subhanallah, like what you explained, and I was just thinking, if I had this information now, what I have now, then it would make such a big difference.
Yeah. So, being du'at in the UK and the English speaking part of the world, anywhere that English is spoken and is the majority, language. So it's a primary mode of communication. You need to have a very solid grasp of your language. You need to have a high vocabulary, which means you must be well read. And secondly, when you do read, you need to be a very proficient reader. You need to be a very highly skilled reader, and you need to read very, very important literature, which has transformed ideas, because only then you can make a difference in these halaqat, in these circles. Marksfield, I remember, it's a Sufi tradition. It's a Sufi, I believe it's a Sufi institute. It's a very nice institute, I believe. I've actually seen it in pictures. And anyway, the point is, institutes, places don't matter. It's the mind. It's where you are. That's where the change happens. That's where the big ideas, the thoughts, revolutions happen inside here, right? So you need to uplift that game. You need to read more. You need to improve your language. You need to improve your vocabulary. You need to improve your expression, writing ability, communication, and read and analyze things better. This is something that is lacking in all of our seminaries. None of the du'at, unfortunately, that I've seen personally in my personal life, can actually engage on this level, other than those, unfortunately, which are from the tradition, which is promoting the bid'ah. They're well read, but they're not educated in the sunnah. They don't have the sunnah with them, right? So, it's not just the Sufism that they have. The problem is that it's the scholastic, the skeptical Sufism, the point where the philosophy becomes all, and they start selling the religion, for pennies and dollars, and it's that kind of du'a, who have championed this methodology in the West, whereas the people who follow the Sunnah, who are supposed to be the du'at, the real du'at, they're lacking in this. So they don't interact with the higher circles in a society, the higher levels of the higher intellects in our society. So the da'wah is, unfortunately, it doesn't reach that level. SubhanAllah. Start to run away with your own thoughts without that. Just elaborate that, sister. I'm not sure in which context you said that. Would you say the doors of ijtihad are open even till today? Yes, of course. Even the ulama who stick to madhahib and they say that the doors of ijtihad are closed, even they do ijtihad. Because nawazil, things which are new, which did not exist, the issues that exist now, that never existed in the past, the reality that we are facing, the cyberspace, the metaverse, all of these things, and then ethics of that. These are things that never existed, and you are going to have to do ijtihad in those things. So ijtihad, the doors for ijtihad can never be closed. It's just a fantasy that madhabists, people who cling on to a madhab blind follow a madhab, a particular school of thought, and they refuse to benefit from others, and they refuse to open up their minds and level up themselves, and they belittle themselves in their minds. And this blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, the mind and an understanding, it's just a fantasy they have. Ijtihad can never be closed. Ijtihad is going to be relevant forever until the end of times. Ijtihad is the only way Islam stays relevant in our day and age. Otherwise, the opinions and the understandings of the fuqaha of the old in certain issues, and it'll be like Talmud, the Talmud of the Jewish tradition. You would think, subhanallah, that Islam is so backward, that in certain issues which have the realities of which have changed now, it wants you to, for example, let me think of a good example. Going to do Hajj, right? And going to Muzdalifah, for example, right? If you couldn't do qiyas, for example, let's say you could do qiyas. The Prophet ﷺ, he did tawaf on his camel, right? It's proven in the Sunnah. Now, certain people now, when they go to Haram, they do tawaf on wheelchairs, right? Where's the parallel? If the doors of ijtihad were closed, how would you make the parallel? You have to do ijtihad. Ijtihad it's a must. It's obligatory. It's without Islam would become irrelevant. Subhanallah. You would come across very, very crazy positions about certain things. Ustad, I feel a lot of the stuff we do, it just doesn't have a name, I think. Brother, explain, what do you mean by that?
So what I mean is, like for example, in terms of reading and everything, with myself, I feel like, I don't know about anyone else, but like, some of the stuff that you mentioned, I feel like, I'll do some of that stuff in terms of reading. Like, for example, when it comes to reviewing or doing mutala'a for any book I'm reading or something like that. So I think some of that stuff it just gets done, but a name hasn't been given to it. Like in terms like how it's mentioned in that book.
Yeah. And the names are not important. The point is, when you read the next book, the names are going to be slightly different. He's going to call it the the analysis stage, then the interpretation, I think the evaluation, and there's the third stage, and then there's the syntopical stage, right? So these stages don't matter. The point is the foundational idea that you have to break that down to its finest hair, that you have to sort of slice the hair down to its finest root, right? And we have this metaphor in Urdu, like bal ki khal, like, you know, you have to sort of de-skin the hair. That's how fine you need to go with your reading, right? So that's that idea, no matter what name you give it, that has to stay relevant. That is something we have to exploit. And then after the more proficient you become at, you know, sort of breaking the books and ideas into its body, into its parts, into its skeleton, and the more proficient you become, the more expert you become, right? And then you dig deeper into each of those, you know, parts of the skeleton, and then you critique and ask and verify, and so all of those things, the more the better. That's the gist of it. You just break things down, and then you analyze them and think deeply about them and ask questions and break things down, poke holes, right? And then connect it with the other pieces of knowledge, and then try to come up with something new, perhaps, right? A new thesis. All of that is essentially the gist of all of that. You can give it whatever name you want. Names are not important. Yes, sister, that's correct. SubhanAllah. Okay, we intended for this to only take hour and a half. We have been going at it for 2.5 hours so far. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Yes, Sister also she has a very, very relevant question. How does one keep motivation doing this? Like, when you read Islamic books, and that is the whole point. We want to read Islamic books. We don't want to be reading this kind of literature as such. And as I said, we don't want to be reading this for a long period of time. There is going to be an effect on your hearts, right? To an extent, if you don't tackle it, or you sort of counter it with your Quran every day and your Sunnah every day, you are going to feel, you know, that kind of dryness and hardening of the heart at some points, sometimes, unless and until you have that bigger goal in mind, that you're doing this for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. Your deen requires this from you. It's a mission, it's jihad from your side, right? And if you giving dawah depends on this, effective dawah depends on you being educated in how you can interact with people, and the ideas and the thoughts and the society that you live in, and you can make Islam relevant in that reality. And that is why you're studying all of this. Then that's a jihad you have to do, right? And when you keep that in mind always, and you remind yourself about that, and you connect yourself again and again and continuously with the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal and the Sunnah and the Seerah, you know, you have that balance. Inshallah, your heart will not be hardened. And in fact, inshallah, this will allow you to, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, you know, at some point, inshallah, you know, feel the how Islam is so beautiful, and Islam is the truth. Inshallah, when we read certain topics, you know, later in relevant to politics, for example, you'll notice how Islamic paradigms in political structures, how Islam defines politics, it's so much more beautiful, right? How it protects the rights of the lowest of the lowest in the society, right? And it honors those who deserve to be honored, right? And it protects the honor of those which, you know, who deserve, who deserve their honor to be protected, for example. And the rights and the duties, how Islam defines, it's very, very beautiful. And then when you contrast it with a secular author, you realize how backward they are, even if they are the father of modern political philosophy, right? Those kind of things, they're uplifting for your iman as well. When you realize the truth of Islam in those settings, and then you can convey that to your audience, inshallah. But this is only a small part of education. As I said, most of our reading is going to be history-based and then subject-based. These great books, I'm going to be choosing specific books out of it, which are going to be idea-focused. We're not going to be reading many of the relevant books in philosophy and other things, but enough, inshallah, which is going to make you relevant as a da'i and critical to implement Islam critical enough that you can implement Islam, in your localities, in your situations, inshallah. Because history is where you draw lessons, it makes sense of everything. And then once you've read an introduction to each science, when you have to research it, you're more confident. And if someone asks you a question, you can answer them, in a better light, according to the Quran and Sunnah, and in line with the correct understanding of the modern realities, and so on and so forth. And then you can tackle certain literature, which is considered great literature, to demystify and sort of destabilize their case, their let's say the paradigm, so that we can say that, وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُسْلِمِينَ وَإِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. That, so you are the superior ones as Muslims, inshallah. So there's an element, we just have to make a sacrifice, small sacrifice, but we have to balance it with the Quran and Sunnah and implementation and action and tahajjud and adhkar and our prayers and nawafil, inshallah. And with this mindset that we're doing this for the sake of Allah, and it will inshallah keep your iman high. But keeping in mind there will be certain times where you will have that, inshallah. Yes, inshallah. So all of these modern theories, they need to be critiqued from the Islamic perspective. So first we need to understand what intersectionality, critical race theory, what do these things even mean? And what is the backdrop of it? Why do these theories come into being? So the backdrop of it, the history of it, the development of ideas. Inshallah, when we understand that better, inshallah, then, and we understand how the political structure works, and we understand how the political groups, the lobbies, they sort of pressurize the government to make things part of the curriculum. And there's that cycle. So when you understand these things, inshallah, then we can sort of come back to the Quran Sunnah and say, look, this is how, Islam sort of breaks that perspective, inshallah. But inshallah, there'll come a time when we'll break down these theories, inshallah. Inshallah. But as the first thing, as always, is the grammar stage. You have to understand things well. What is intersectionality, critical race theory, this non-binarism that's happening now in the society, many things, these theories. When you understand the motivation of things a lot of times, you can critique them according to Islam. A lot of times, many of the motivation behind certain narrative and philosophies are very either naturalistic tendencies or humanistic tendencies, or there's always a certain philosophy guiding these things. If you can break that philosophy down, you can break the theories down, and you can break them. You can attack the motivation of the original authors, inshallah. Inshallah, when we do that, of course, we'll have a very, inshallah, anytime we discuss, so we haven't come to that stage yet. When we come to that stage, inshallah, we'll always look at the Islamic paradigm first. Okay, so we break down things, and then we look at Islamic paradigm, and then we critique them, inshallah. So there's nothing to worry about here, inshallah. And because I don't want to go into detail about each of these things, because I don't actually, so I know what critical race theory is, but I don't understand. I don't remember if I read it. The other word, intersectionality. I've not heard of that before, I don't think. But in any case, the point is that when we understand it, and we truly break down its, as I say, ma lahu wa ma alayhi and ma qablahu wa ma ba'dahu, all of that, inshallah, we can critique it, inshallah. I mean, that's the whole point behind this project, isn't it? It's to provide an Islamic perspective on all of these issues. Tayyib, any last thoughts from you guys on today's seminar before we call it a day here, inshallah? It's almost 2 o'clock for me. So we'll just call it a day here, inshallah. If any last points, any minds, any last words, questions, feedback on today's seminar?
Ustad, finish with a little poetry, AZHAR or something, inshallah.
Poetry.
Finish with some maybe Arabic poetry or just ending the lesson with something like that, inshallah.
Oh dear. I wrote a line of poetry here, I think somewhere. And it was one of my first lines in Urdu poetry. Because I didn't really write poetry in Urdu very much, but this was one of the first. I'll translate what it means. If I can find it. Such an old journal. Brings back so many memories. Oh, there's Noughts and Crosses. I was playing Noughts and Crosses with someone at some point. Subhanallah. It says 21st of April, 2015. 9 years ago.
Ustad, it's okay, leave it because it's quite late on your side anyway. It's okay, don't worry about it, Ustad.
No, I think this will be a good sort of a way to end it, inshallah. I think I've found an English one. I can't find the somewhere here. How many of you understand Urdu? How many of the students understand Urdu? Can you guys not everything will be lost in translation. No, can't find it. SubhanAllah. Have some other time. I'll just read this in English that I've found. It's unedited. So if there's anything wrong with it. Time but digs its own grave with self-imposed significance. Is there any... Okay, so Brother Khalid understands it. Mine, me, just two people. What does that mean, sister?
Poetry.
Oh, might be. Right. Please, let's stick to the English one. Time but digs its own grave with self-imposed significance. Is there any time to be brave? Tick-tock, it ticks away on occurrence. Tick-tock, it ticks away on occurrence. What courage holdeth thine rage? Chivalry is but a name, for never could it render a bee's sting lame. Time does ticketh away, but you cannot rewind. Thus, what use is your willed, ego-filled chivalry when you cannot escape that sting far behind? Answer me then, O bud, is there any time to be brave? I have no idea what I was writing about. Something to do with, how time, sometimes it makes itself so significant, but it's just a self-imposed significance. I think we just value time sometimes way more than its actual value, perhaps. Sometimes we just need to be present in the moment and not worry about, losing time, Allahu Alam. That's one idea. And the second is perhaps 9 years or yeah. And the second is how helpless you are. How helpless you are as a human being. You can be, chivalrous, brave, courageous, all of that, and you can be angry, all of that. But all of that is just a name. When a bee comes and stings you, right? Your chivalry, your bravery, your strength, nothing comes to help you, right? Nothing is of any benefit because you can never rewind that sting. You can never undo it. The bee's done a job, and the courage and all that. So sometimes, you're really helpless, and time can't really undo that. But then you think time is so significant. Well, you can't, unwind the time. So sometimes it just imposes itself to be significant when it's not. Allah Alam. Anyway, this is I was when I was 18 years old at that time, 19 years old, something like that. So all right, everyone, Jazakumullah khairah for being patient today, and for Sister also, she woke up at 4 o'clock for the seminar. Allah barik to her and all the students. May Allah bless all of you for joining. بارك الله فيكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.